I'm here to introduce the next speaker, Charissa Pang. Charissa is an experience designer with 7 years of experience in the industry. She comes from a research background. She's super interested in uncovering new opportunities in traditional spaces and industries, finding new ways to create customer experiences with emerging tech, where there's really no or little instructions and a need for experimentation. Outside of Thoughtworks, Chris is also a newly certified yoga instructor, and she'll be teaching her first yoga class this Sunday. Welcome, Charissa.
Thank you. Love the excitement for emerging tech. So reinvigorating customer experiences. Are you ready for XR tech? So classic opener, what is XR? Can we hear some voices in the room? Would anyone like to shout out based on your experiences? Sorry? VR, AR, yes. If you play Pokemon Go, my sister loves to play that. Or if you use Instagram filters. So, for instance, you realize that I think AR, VR, all these fall under this broad umbrella of XR, which is extended reality. And it's actually pretty ubiquitous in our daily lives today. So a definition for you to take away, extended reality, or in short, XR, is an umbrella term for all immersive technologies that blend the physical and digital world. So the diagram below here shows XR tech on the spectrum. So on one end, we have the real environment, where the user is actually physically present, as compared to the far end of the spectrum of the virtual environment, where they are fully immersed in a digital environment. So everything else in between, it's good to also know that the technology used is also pretty different. For AR, like somebody in the audience mentioned, it's one where digital content is being overlaid in another environment. And for mixed reality, it's a mixture of things in between. So I'll park these definitions as broad guidelines for you for now, because if we go into the deep definitions, it can sometimes be a religious discussion. So looking at the industry right now, there are some notable successes in the XR space in the B2B domain. So we have heard last year that Microsoft had a $20 billion AR deal struck with the US Army to train their soldiers in the field. So with this technology, with the HoloLens 2, they essentially can recreate certain scenarios and ready their soldiers in terms of being familiar with the grounds and in terms of the muscle memory as well to reduce human error. So another notable example would be Walmart, where they have actually trained over more than 1.4 million employees of late using VR tech through simulated training. So what might strike you as something that is very common for Walmart would be Black Friday swarms. And that's not something that you can really be fully prepared for. So what Walmart does is to actually recreate these scenarios to see how employees would react, how managers can actually anticipate these very unpredictable situations. So just getting themselves very exposed to various types of scenarios gets them a bit more prepared and gives them confidence in the field. So while there are these big numbers here in the B2B space, there are actually like quantifiable metrics that actually give these businesses like Microsoft, Walmart, to continue investing in these emerging tech. But when we think about customer experiences in the B2C domain, this does not always translate as persuasively, just with like this quantifiable metrics. We also look at the qualitative experience and customer experiences. So where can we go from here? In the customer domain, we are trending towards not just personalized, but also hyper-personalized experiences, where people are looking for content and services for them at the right time and in the right way. So when you think about in the right way, you think of the medium that you're delivering this experience, so mobile app, website, things like that, or even on-the-ground services. And think about providing it in the right way. There is also the interaction that you want to engage the customer with, and also in terms of the brand tonality, how do you want to speak to the customer? On top of that, customers are also looking for increasingly high-touch experiences woven into this seamless, interconnected ecosystem. So when we think of customer experiences, it's no longer a single moment in time, it's not just in that micro moment, but it's about the series of interactions and how the relationship evolves and builds over time. So quite notably, in the retail space, you can see that actually AR actually has created much higher conversion rates, up to 90% higher conversion rates for people who engage with AR as compared to those who don't. So there has been some traction for XR in the customer domain, but most people are still wondering, what is that real business or user problem that we're solving? What is that value that we're bringing with this emerging tech? So when I looked at the various successes and even failures of XR applications in the world today, what I found in terms of the different patterns led me to build this 3D gaps framework that I'll be giving you a sneak peek of today. Mainly, there are 3 key dimensions that contribute to the success of an XR experience. So firstly, we have the goal. So when we think about the goal, what is that business and user goal we're trying to achieve? And that will determine what is that customer experience that we want to deliver, and what is that level of presence with this emerging interactive tech that we want to provide the customer with. The second dimension around agency is one where we decide in this experience how much control as a brand or business you want to confer to the customer in this interactive experience. And in the last dimension, we have psychological safety. This is probably the most critical dimension and fundamental dimension when customers are using XR tech. So I'll go into more details into this framework. This is where is a broad overview of the first 2 dimensions. And here I've mapped all the different types of customer experiences across various domains, and we'll go into detail later. But in the vertical axis, you can see the first dimension, which is the goal, from one end of being functional to emotional. So at the functional end, the experience is expected to give the user with new skills and information, hence confidence, essentially mirroring that reality for them. So that experience is actually informed by reality, and so that they can actually, when they remove, let's say, the VR experience, essentially they would be able to recreate that simulated experience. As we move up the spectrum and provide the user with even more presence and feeling of being there with this interactive tech, the user would basically be embracing a lot more multi-sensorial richness, and then that's where we can actually push the conventions of what seems real. So go into the details later on. So on the horizontal axis, it's where we see user agency. So that's where we decide as a brand or business how much autonomy you want to continue to hold versus giving it to the user for them to basically be in the wild and craft their own narrative. So this third dimension, as well as psychological safety, will determine the boundaries that we want to draw for the user, be it in terms of that physical and digital divide. So whether we want to make it a very clear demarcation or one that basically we can break those barriers down for them. So go into detail into each one of these experiences to make it a little bit more concrete. So designing with a goal, like I've mentioned, it moves from the functional to the emotional spectrum. And how you achieve that is to provide the user with more multi-sensory richness. So the interaction is no longer one that is just visual or just touch. It could be one that also incorporates your gaze. It could be one that also incorporates things like haptic touch or even a full body immersion. So XR tech can provide things like that, and it will give them the opportunity to push boundaries beyond what seems real as they actually get more emotionally vested and committed further up the spectrum. And that's where the user actually feels like they're being detached from that physical environment that they started with and kind of transported into that new dimension. So we'll be exploring the overall framework here together. So on the first experience that I would like to share would be the Teach Me experience, often seen in defense, manufacturing, logistics, automotive, healthcare. You might be pretty familiar with this because I cited some examples earlier on as well. So in this experience, it's about building familiarity and consistency in my skills, giving the user almost robot-like proficiency. So apart from those case studies we shared before, I'd also like to share a case study that was done at Thoughtworks just this year as well that was launched. So this was pretty cool, where we had a partnership with Lenovo Think Reality glasses, where the user gets to get this 360 virtual environment view on site by wearing the glasses and get off-site support and assistance as well. So just wanted this to soak in because it was a very big effort by the company. Okay, so further up the spectrum, still in that functional dimension, we have the show me experience. This is often seen in retail, tourism, real estate, telemedicine, domains like that. You personally might have experienced it yourself as well, especially during the pandemic, where you had this show and tell experience from the comforts of your own home. So in this experience, it's all about giving the user easy access, giving them a taster of the experience. So just a caveat as well that it's not meant to replace real life. So some more pertinent examples that you may have heard about would be the IKEA Place AR app. So this was actually a demo I did in my house where I want to get a glass cabinet. So just download the app super quick, scrolled through the catalog, found the cabinet that I wanted, and then actually dropped it into the app to see whether it fit in terms of the dimensions, the color, and just the overall look with all the other furniture that I had. Super simple app, one that you may be already very familiar with as well. Another one that's probably cooler would be the Envision VR 360 visits. So likewise, I did this demo at home. So you can see my dirty floors there, where I actually used my phone to pan around to demarcate the floor and the height of my waist from how I was walking. And then immediately, so this is my house, and then immediately I could transition into this showroom in Sydney and get a view of Bondi Beach and feel that expanse that is very contrasting to this limited roadside view that I have at home. So it was pretty mind-blowing for this particular app. And if you realized, I also kept it static so that you could have a go and just download it yourselves now and have a go and try it. Super simple. But XR tech is not just show and tell. XR tech can enrich experiences by fascinating the user. And what I mean by this is that through more choices and interaction, XR can let the user try, experiment, and even fail, or dare to fail at least. So this is also another example of more of like an experiment that we did at Thoughtworks for Domino's, and the video was not appearing. Oh, it is, sorry. Okay, so let you have a go to watch that video. Could we get some help here? Thank you. Although I could narrate it as well if it doesn't work, but it's not as fascinating for sure. Okay, I will just narrate it because I think there's a technical difficulty. As with tech, we always face that, right? So pretty sure you can empathize with how I feel right now. So it was a very simple demo that we did actually. Although I think it took quite a bit of effort. So the user gets to walk into Domino's here and actually get to customize their own pizza through various sauces, ingredients, although there were some limited options as well. To control the taste. So if you're as bad as cooking and baking as I am, then this would actually fascinate you quite a bit because you can mix and match and, well, it can't go that wrong as well. Yeah. So higher up, taking you all the way up the spectrum in the most explorative and experimentative quadrant, in the more emotionally charged quadrant, one that is a lot more immersive that's why I coined it, the Enliven Me experience. So this is very commonly seen if you play games in social entertainment, sports, music, gaming. And with this experience, it's about connecting the user deeply, helping them to connect with others and the environment by completing this experience. So this is also the quadrant where people are a lot more receptive to roll with the punches and see how things go. So it's a lot more experimentative in that sense as well. So here is an example with the Oculus VR. So you may have heard of Rec Room because it actually helped the Oculus to top the App Store during Christmas last year. So maybe you contributed to that sales as well. So I'll give you a quick demo of this. Bear with me, at the start I'm a bit clumsy because it was the first time I was using it. So I fumbled, bumped into a couple of stuff along the way. And there is no sound. It's okay, I will walk you through it as well, no worries.
Welcome to Rec
There is sound, okay.
For your first day, we have a quick orientation to show you what Rec Room is all about and give you a chance to get the hang of the controls. Head inside to get started.
It's a long walk up, actually. Bear with the video for a bit. Yeah, a bit embarrassing. And also to mention, I don't actually play such games. Like, I don't play games
Rec Room
online,
is the best
so
place
I'm
to
really
meet up
bad.
with your friends and play games together. With a friendly and growing global community, you'll always have others to enjoy your time with, no matter what you love to do.
Yeah, I'm trying.
Almost everywhere you go in Rec Room, you'll see people playing games together. Don't worry if you're not too competitive. Even when the competition gets intense, the spirit of being excellent to each other is always front and center.
Come on, walk faster. Okay, I'm finally in.
All right, let's practice playing with some of the objects in the room. Give it a shot.
So I can demo. When I was using the Oculus, I was like doing this, you know, like pick it up, pick it up. And it was a bit difficult at first. But once I got the hang of it, then I became a lot more competitive. Yeah, so you can imagine if it were a multiplayer game as well, you will be very competitive for sure. Okay, enough fun and laughter at my klutziness. So here is just a recap of the first dimension that we explored in terms of the goal that we are trying to achieve. So these experiences mapped out on this map here shows that as you're increasingly giving the user that sense of presence and immersion, that's where it makes the user a lot more, not just functionally driven, but also emotionally vested in the experience. The second dimension I want to share with everyone is designing for agency. So when we think about customer experiences again, I mentioned that we think of not just a solo interaction, but one that evolves over a series of interactions. And you can think of it as a story. And XR actually enriches this experience through this interactive co-authorship between the brand or business and the user. So this allows the user to craft their own unique narratives and really gives them that chance to attach personal meaning to the experience as well. So a good example, or one that's very relatable right now, would be if you were to travel for exposure. So you will see this in tourism, film, journalism, even education as well. And this experience is really all about exposing and experiencing and soaking it all in. So enrich what I currently know and believe, giving the user more understanding. So an example could be that if you're using, let's say, Google VR 360, it's like taking that little yellow man and dropping them into the map, and then voila, you get that whole expanse of, let's say, if you were to explore Changi Beach. Sorry, this is my backyard at home. So it was just a convenient example. So it's pretty cool that you get to just like roam around and explore freely. But if the objective of the business was to deliver certain key messages, such as marine life conservation and things like that, then the message might get lost if you were just to leave the user to freely roam this way. Pretty much like the people in that photo there, where, yeah, pretty up to their own devices, they seem a bit lost. So this brings me to how we can actually improve the XR experience by actually not giving the user so much agency on the left side, but actually maybe restrict some of those actions that they get to do, restrict some of that environment that they get to explore, or do it in a more considered way. So this is where the user can be more involved in the experience through this directed storytelling and draw more user empathy and to compel them to actually take a real call to action. So in contrast, you can look at this experience by YouTube Immerse,
Blue Planet,
where you get a lot more deeper meaning
magical,
and understanding
complex, beautiful place
of that coastal ecology.
But almost nobody sees it.
The ocean protects us, it feeds us, yet few can see how beautiful and powerful that it can be. What we don't see, we don't connect with. So we need to look so that we can change that. The diversity of life in the ocean is like no terrestrial place on Earth.
Biodiversity is the collection of life in all its shapes and forms. We depend on biodiversity for clean water and air, for food and medicine, and for the overall resilience of our planet.
At the heart of all of this diversity in the ocean is one of the most amazing ecosystems on our planet, coral reefs.
When you look at a coral reef, what you see is really cathedral-like. It's a huge structure. Corals, they compete for space, so they grow side by side, one on top of the other, that now creates space for other organisms to live in.
Sadly, biodiversity in our oceans is declining rapidly. We're losing species before we even discover them. On coral reefs, higher than normal ocean temperatures are causing the corals to turn white and die.
That was a dramatic end. But I hope you saw the contrasting difference and also realized that on the agency spectrum, more choice doesn't always mean better. It depends on what the business objective is, and it depends on what is that customer experience that you want to deliver. So on that note, I also can leave you with some tips on creating that storytelling experience. So we have 3 key things that you can take away with. Firstly is in terms of how you want to spark that curiosity in the user. So when you think of sparking this curiosity, it's about thinking of the different affordances and the different constraints that you want to present the user with. So I hope you're paying attention earlier, because in terms of the affordances, you will notice things like light and shadow that came into play. You would see that they saw that the doctor as the scuba diver was also kind of an affordance cue that guided that whole storyline. And when we think of the different constraints, it's also about showing what certain things look like in terms of that visual realism, or whether it eggs you on to kind of interact with it. So that's in terms of sparking that curiosity. In terms of interaction, it's not just also all about touch that we're so familiar with, but you will notice that I think I was panning all around, and that's where that 360 gaze actually really draws your attention to things. Or if you want a more fully immersive experience, you can kind of enable other sort of haptic touches as well. Like let's say you touch a fish and then you can feel a vibration. So things like that to consider. And in the larger storyline, that interaction also has to be considered, whether it's an episodic one, let's say it's just in that particular documentary, or one that carries throughout the entire experience. So at the kind of global level that you would consider. And last but not least would be to make sure that we listen for feedback consistently. So what are in terms of the data points that we're looking at, is the user interacting with certain things, dropping out, avoiding certain things, and that's where we can iterate on the experience further. That's Ed, by the way, if you all haven't realized. So just mapping it out again on the 2 dimensions. We're getting there, and now we'll explore the final dimension on psychological safety. So put very simply, if the user feels safe, the user feels unsafe at the lower end of the spectrum. That's where we want to clearly demarcate the physical and digital boundaries to make it seem like a simulated experience. So you know that you're wearing a device, or basically you're still in your comfort zone. As compared to at the far end of the spectrum, if you feel fully receptive to the XR experience, you have tried and tested it, you play games, things like that, that's where you want to immerse fully, and you want to try and experiment and get things that you can't really get in the real world. So that's where we give that user a greater sense of presence in that sense, and break down the physical-digital divide. So in this case, XR allows the experience to be readily accessible to the user, depending on how they feel at that point in time, and how it actually progresses as well when the story unfolds. For them, there's always the chance of accepting that, joining that experience, or also exiting as well. So it allows them to progress at their own pace. So this brings me to the Relieve Me experience, often seen in counseling or therapy. It's where it helps the user to manage their emotions safely when they have very low psychological safety. Or if they're more fully vested, they're feeling safer, and then that's where they transition into this Embrace Me experience, where it helps them to understand and embrace how they feel. So this is a very heartening example that I can share with you. In terms of XR tech being used to treat PTSD, there's also depression, ADHD, or even treating phobias. And it has been clinically proven to be successful for many years as well. So in this example here, you can see that before, this war veteran, that before, these are actually images that were used in the XR experience. It seems like a PlayStation game. It's like crudely rendered, but yet actually triggers very grueling emotions for the user. And that's where it becomes very overwhelming. So in terms of the XR experience, they can always step back and try again another day when they're feeling a bit better. So you can see that over time, in 13 weeks, he had completely changed, and he no longer gets nightmares about the Iraq War. So it's a completely different change in behavior that we can create in the user as well with XR tech. And to also let you know that this is something that has been clinically proven and tried and tested with many different war veterans, and really shows the potential of XR tech in the field today. It is also scientifically backed as well. So just jolted my memory about this. It's a cognitive behavior intervention therapy, essentially, that XR tech is being used in to give the user that prolonged exposure so that they can kind of go into the experience, get that simulation, and through this consistent, repeatable experience, they get to basically experience these triggers, learn how to confront them in the simulated environment, and be able to kind of replicate that in the real world after that. So some tips as well in creating that psychological safety for the user would be to draw clear boundaries for them in terms of the physical and digital divide, always having flexible entry and exit points, having clear feedback. And I think what's really important as well, and is often forgotten, is that consistent experience that the user can have so that their expectations are managed. So if they're interacting with it a certain way, the feedback that comes back should be the same as well. Okay. So with this renewed lens as well, I ran out of photos, so I'm very embarrassed to put this there, which is myself. How to prepare right now and the various roles that you're in today. So we have a very diverse audience, but I think one common thread for everyone is that you can help in whatever role you are to help spot opportunities. And in classic kind of product development, we still fall into these three key areas that we need to address, which is of desirability, viability, and feasibility. The considerations are pretty similar, but there are some additional things as well. So in terms of desirability, same thing, and most critically, that people always fail to see is what is the business and user problem that we can solve. And because XR tech is also in a more experimental stage, it's whether or not it's worthy investing. So can XR solve the problem better than other solutions? And thinking about XR not in a moment in time, but over a series, over a story as well. So how can XR enrich the customer journey? So not just as a siloed experience, but how is it will come together with the apps, websites, or even on-the-ground services that you're providing? And lastly, what would be, is it accessible and willing to be received by users as well? So it really depends on the tech savviness and their experience with emerging tech so far. In terms of business viability, it would of course be great if you can predict the ROI of this experience. But if it's not, and it's actually a spin-off, a time-boxed experiment, what are the key learning goals that we want to take away from this? And lastly, the one that actually our clients face quite a bit is in terms of feasibility, whether it can be built with the time, skills, and technology that we have, given that it's still an evolving space. So for instance, in terms of retail space, what we hear that a very common struggle is in terms of the inventory management, that even rendering the images of the catalog in 3D is already a struggle. But how can we be aware of these struggles and actually prepare ourselves if this is an experience you want to provide? Also, if you're in development, you would also realize that there are increasingly blurring roles in development because of that limited tooling. the role between designer and developer is a bit still mixed. We have various tools like, it really depends on also everyone's proficiencies and also the time and resources that we're constrained by. But for right now, in terms of tools, we have like various authoring tools with easy for beginners to get started with, like Tilt Brush, Blender, things like that, or in the higher end, something with a steeper learning curve, things like Unreal, Unity, things like that, that people have dipped their toes in already. Or if you're a developer, there's like AirCore, AirKit. Okay, I'll stop here. Okay, then, but although all these things are still in the explorative and experimental space, we can, regardless, I think it's always getting used to being scrappy. So the fastest, quickest way that I've learned personally as well is just using paper. So being able to kind of draw and sketch in 3D spaces, determining like the light and shadow, and then also that what is that storyboard narrative. It's no longer just about like simple wireframes, but you need to convey things like essentially when you're building a movie, how is it going to be like in terms of that mood and lighting, in terms of the emotions that you want to drive along the way. So building from sketching, building for paper prototypes will not go away, and it's always very handy and easy for everyone to dip their toes into. Thirdly, it's getting used to multiple iterations before getting it right. So that's why it's that increased collaboration that we should be seeing between people working in the XR space, because you'll be trying and testing a lot. And there's a lot more unpredictable kind of user behavior in terms of different people have different levels of user comfort, receptivity, and things like that. It also depends on the moment in time or the setting in terms of the environment. If it's too bright, too loud and noisy, it all affects the experience. And the execution of it is actually critical. So get used to being scrappy and having multiple iterations before getting it right. And I think lastly, it's also what I learned is that there's not really many mature automated testing tools as of yet. So that's where the industry is still evolving. So to come to the end, is that XR should, just a gentle reminder as well, that XR should not be that standalone fancy thing. So always be thinking about it in terms of that real business and user needs that we are meeting and the additional value that we're bringing. And also in terms of how it affects the holistic customer journey. And I want to leave everyone with this as well. To consider the accessibility of the experience, ensuring it remains safe and inclusive for everyone. So this in itself deserves a talk on its own, so I'll park you with this thought and just have everyone have a quick glimpse. If you want to have a look at the GAPS framework once again, I will step out of the frame if you want to take photos, which I'm so excited everybody wants to take photos. And the third dimension as well. And cool, thank you everyone. I hope that you have a renewed lens of approaching the problems and solutions you're exploring at your work. Thank you.